Hey everybody, Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here with an update on Dorian. Some changes overnight, more so in the fact that the center of the storm is relocated north. That has big amplifications on and implications on how strong and big that Dorian is going to get. So let's get right to the satellite image. Show you what's going on. The storm is gaining strength today. Hurricane hunters are out there right now. They're finding that the pressure is down to 1,001 millibars, so it's getting stronger. The lower the pressure, the stronger the storm. It's also very symmetrical right now. You can see it's a very good-looking storm from above, and below it's starting to get its shape back together over yesterday when it was weakening. I'm going to loop this a couple times. I'm going to let this load, but you can see the circulation somewhere in here. And it's going to miss Puerto Rico from a direct impact. There will be indirect impacts on Puerto Rico, big time flooding, some wind. But because the center isn't going to pass over Puerto Rico or Hispaniola, that means it's not going to weaken. It's going to slowly gain strength. And the thing about this storm is once it gets up into this area, north of the Big Islands, we talked about this yesterday and the day before, this area up here, conditions much more favorable for development. Very warm water, low shear, and less dry air. So potential that this storm can get very, very strong. Let me show you the forecast track as of 5 a.m. This was the 5 a.m. advisory. The 11 a.m. will be out any minute now, probably while I'm posting this, but I can kind of tell you where I think the forecast is going to go. You could see the area that we're watching, Florida, but the Carolinas really need to pay attention to this as well. That we are not out of the woods. In fact, I think the Carolinas are coming a little bit more into play, but really all the way down to Miami needs to watch it. So all that area in yellow. Now I'm going to throw on the guidance here, and I'll show you why I think the Carolinas need to be a little wary, is because you could see some of the guidance shows a recurve towards the Carolina coast Monday or Tuesday or even Wednesday. But the consensus models are all kind of coming in on Florida. And I can show you another example of this. I have basically the models turned on for the consensus and the forecast track. I'll go in close just to show you real quickly where the hurricane hunters are. They're actually where that L is. So the new center is forming the new center. That's where it's moving. The old center was here. It's moving in this direction. So it's actually pretty close to the forecast track. These circles with the T, that's the consensus track. It shows it becoming a Category 1 storm up in here on Friday night, and then becoming a Category 3 Saturday night off the coast of Florida, then slowing down quite a bit, and then approaching the coast of Florida and maybe weakening again by Monday into Monday night. So the hurricane center stays really close to this consensus track right here. So I would expect the forecast to be very close to this area, maybe just a continuation, but it kind of gives you an idea of the area we're watching here off Florida. But because of the potential that this storm could do one of these, the Carolinas, especially South Carolina in particular, needs to pay very close attention to this, because you can see the way that the kind of consensus of the guidance is going up there. I'll show you another perspective of this with the ensembles, which I really like to look at. And you can look at the spread in the ensembles. They're kind of all over the place, from southern Florida even up to South Carolina. But the consensus, like I just showed you, kind of the mean, is right here. So a lot of times when we show you spaghetti plots, the reason we show you those, and I think they're very useful, is because we like to show you the spread where this is a possibility and this is a possibility, but the mean is right in there. And that spread is really important because that kind of shows you the areas that you need to watch. That's why the Carolinas definitely need to pay attention to it. But there's some consistency in the long range forecast of this heading towards this area around Florida, which is in particular an area that we're watching closely. Now, you may have seen me show this graphic on Facebook and Twitter earlier, and the reason I'm showing you this is a couple things to point out first. This is potentially a storm developing there, and this is Aaron, so we're not worried about that. And this is another potential system separate from Dorian. We got to keep an eye on. That's the upper low that the models are trying to hint at. But this is the storm we're watching right here. This is Dorian. And if you look carefully, each one of these, and I'll move my face out of the way here. Hopefully I can move my face out of there. There we go. Move me up here. You can see down here, these are each of the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 runs of the European model. And you can see early on there was this shift early on in the track north, because you can see that the lines are shifting this direction. But long term, they're all very consistent. So what's happened in the short term as the relocation of the center further north has actually shifted the track away from the big islands. That means the storm can get stronger. But what that also means is it doesn't really weaken the storm, and the long-term track doesn't change all that much as it moves off to the west. And just to kind of show you what I'm talking about here, I'll look at the European model, and the thing we're watching as it moves north and gains strength is that this ridge, which you could see starting to build, I'll move me back down here, this big red area, this is the ridge of high pressure. This is the thing we're watching right here. We expect this to build and force the storm back to the west. Now, the GFS last night went crazy and weakened this thing down and didn't have anything. I think it was kind of out to lunch, and it's actually come back to earth a little bit today. But I look at consistency in the guidance as well. The GFS has been all over the place, but you can kind of see the trend towards Florida there. And so the fact that the consensus models and most of the models and the fact that the European, which is in the ensembles, are all pointing, there's a general trend of this Florida landfall. But I will caution you that the Carolinas, it wouldn't take much for this to recurve up here. So there's still a threat to the Carolinas, though right now it primarily looks like the Florida landfall, at least at this point. We're pretty far out. Just to show you, this trough is lifting out. This upper low, which is over the Bahamas now, that's the system you saw on my previous map that was trying to develop it, working on the surface. So that's something maybe for the Western Gulf to keep an eye on. But you can kind of see the system coming up here. There's Dorian right there, heading towards the coast. So this is something to watch. This is a trend to keep in mind. But I firmly believe coming up in the 11 a.m. advisory, you're going to see a couple things, maybe a subtle shift in the track, but you're also going to see a huge intensity jump because the storm not interacting with the big mountains means somewhere off the coast of Florida here, this is going to be possibly a Category 3 hurricane. It's also going to become a much larger hurricane, which means in size. So it's going to get much bigger. So if I show you this real quickly, I'm going to turn off all of the tracks here. Let me turn off these tracks so we don't get too confused. But I'll put the wind probabilities on here real quick. We'll take off Aaron because I don't want to see Aaron right now. But it kind of shows you the spread in the winds. So for the Carolinas, you can see from about Wilmington down to the Keys, this is an area we all have to pay attention to in particular. Now, a lot of folks asking me about the Western Carolinas. We don't really know. Unless this thing comes well inland and comes up here, this might be more of a coastal issue, but everybody from the Outer Banks south needs to watch this because if this thing starts to recurve sooner, then the Outer Banks in eastern North Carolina becomes more at play. So that's what we're watching with this advisory. I think it's very fascinating to see that the European model is really, really consistent with a Florida, central Florida landfall, even northern Florida landfall. And the fact that I see the consensus guidance all in this general area, I don't think you're going to see a big change in the forecast track here. Couple things to keep in mind will be the intensity, the size, and the speed. This thing could slow down a little bit as it gets larger and stronger. That means more time for surge to build up. So that would mean even with the storm passing to the south, there could be very big surge along the South Carolina coast, the Georgia coast, and more at Jacksonville. Always an area susceptible to big time surge, St. Johns River area. Something we have to watch very, very carefully. And then next week, if the storm makes landfall down here, eventually it is going to recurve up into here. The question is, how far inland does that happen? Does it happen on the coast? These are all possibilities, even with a Florida landfall, and something to keep in mind, okay? So I'll post the update when the 11 a.m. comes out. It should be out in about 30 minutes or so. But trust me, it's going to be very similar to this, though it's going to be a lot stronger. And just the intensity forecast, just to show you the spread, you can see the spread is as high as a Category 4 down to a weak Category 1. But the consensus is right there on that Category 2-3 range. And I think Category 3 is probably a pretty good bet at this point because the water and the shear over the Bahamas and the northern Bahamas in particular is very, very favorable for a deepening storm. Again, the timing of this is still in that Monday, Tuesday time frame. I think that's the time. So for folks planning vacations or beach trips, if you're going to Florida, you got to pay big time attention and maybe think about some changes. But on the North Carolina coast, as long as you're coming back Sunday or Monday even, I wouldn't change my plans right now because the timing, it might be down here Monday and it won't get up here till Tuesday or Wednesday. So still pay it close attention up here, but don't make any drastic changes this far out. You got to wait and see. We still got a couple more days before you can make those decisions. Of course, I will post updates throughout the day. I'll probably do another big live stream tomorrow answering questions. I will do a vlog daily, though, up until storm makes landfall.